It's one of these things I sit on a number of calls and we all wonder why we get prompted.
Looks like Jensen's here via chat today. That is one thing with Teams. Anybody that's invited to the meeting or in the meeting can see the meeting chat, and if they have a Teams account, they can continue to see any chat that happens after the meeting's over. So if you want to talk bad about Andy or I, please do it outside of the Teams chat.
I just do it to your face.
I know. And as Rachel just put in chat, she will be recording today, and recording has started.
Okay.
Okay. I want to be where Laura and Molly are. Their background is a lot better than mine.
I'm on the Buffalo.
I'm at Cobb Point Park.
You know, I love that picture.
Sweet.
Oh, let Marty in.
No, don't let Marty in.
Red Rover, let Marty in.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right. Enjoy the meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
The recommendations for videos has totally supplanted.
So Ben, your mic is very difficult to hear you. I don't know what's going on there.
Andy, I'm counting 8 or 9.
Gloria just joined.
Okay, good. Well, we have a quorum. Let's go ahead and begin.
Uh-oh, now I don't know where I am.
You're here, Marty.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I don't see anybody's faces. I'm in downloads, wherever that is.
Well, my face doesn't show anyway because my computer camera doesn't work. But do I have any additions or corrections to the February minutes? Do I have a motion to approve them as written?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Molly. A second.
Gloria.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say yes.
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 Yeah.
Anybody opposed? Okay. The very next item on the agenda is a report on House Bill 488 and Senate Bill 230. I think Billy is on.
Mm-hmm.
Can I turn it over to you?
I'd be happy to, yeah. I'll figure out. I'm still getting used to finally getting used to using Zoom. So I'll try to see if I can share my screen with you all here.
Okay, just quick for while Billy's trying to do this and for everyone else. Billy, have you ever shared a screen in Teams before?
I have not.
Okay, there should be a share content button, and then when you click on it, it should give you a slew of options. One is your desktop, which will share everything on your desktop. The other is the window, which will show exactly what you see to everyone else. And then you may actually have the ability to share the document depending on your Teams account. For everybody else getting into Teams, if you would like, there should be you should see the chat button. You should see like the 2 little people that allow you to show participants, and then there should be like 3 little dots, and those are for more actions. If you click on that, you should be able to go to large gallery, which will let you see everyone, full screen mode, apply background effects, and various other things in there.
How do we get to see everybody?
Well, now you can't, because now Billy's got his screen up, or he was. I could see his screen that you were sharing. But if you go to...
Well, let's go ahead with that.
Okay. I'll show you afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. real quick, I'll just confirm here. How did I do, Laura? Was I able to share it correctly?
You are. Everybody
Yep.
should be able to see it. Just for those that are looking at it right now, if it is too small or too large, you can hit Control and then the plus or the minus sign, and it will increase or decrease the size of his presentation screen. When one increases, the chat and everything else decreases, just FYI, but it'll help you if you're having trouble reading it. And it looks like a good size to me, Billy.
Fantastic. All right, and I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much. Just really quick, always like to make sure, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, has not fantastic. Good evening, y'all. I'm Billy Davies. I'm here as a Kansas City resident and as an organizer with the Sierra Club Missouri chapter, and I appreciate you all giving me a moment to speak this evening, and thank you all for your continued advocacy for climate action in our city and being advocates for public health and the environment, and being willing to take action to protect our community's health and well-being. So yeah, just giving an overview of Senate Bill 230, House Bill 488, just giving a quick overview of the text, some background on what these pieces of legislation are all about, and just where they fit in as part of a national trend that we're seeing over the last year, where the legislation stands now, and some potential next steps. And so just to get us started, here is the legislation itself. It's only 2 sentences, very short, and pretty to the point. Just reading out loud. Under this act, no political subdivision is allowed to adopt an ordinance, resolution, regulation, code, or policy that prohibits or has the effect of prohibiting the connection or reconnection of a utility service based upon the type or source of energy to be delivered to an individual customer. And then it has a carve out for political subdivisions. And so this bill poses some serious challenges has some serious impacts on the ability of cities and jurisdictions throughout Missouri to take action to protect the health and well-being and make choices about their energy future that are in line with community goals and needs, especially because of this highlighted text prohibiting any policy or law or ordinance or resolution that has the effect of prohibiting the connection of a utility service based on the type or source of energy to be delivered to a household or business. And this is similar to legislation that we're seeing across the country that initially started in Arizona and was largely backed by gas industry lobbyists that are responding to cities across the country taking action to address the climate crisis and reduce emissions within their cities, and in particular efforts by cities to adopt strong building codes or incentives for building electrification to reduce pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment. And so again, just kind of getting into some background, this bill largely backed by the gas lobby and allies in state legislatures across the country. So when we're talking about gas, we're talking about methane, a potent greenhouse gas that's 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and something that cities across the country are working to address in their built environment. As we've seen here in Kansas City, in the region and in the city, folks are taking a lot of great strides in understanding the benefits of electrification, reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and taking steps that help make our buildings more energy efficient and healthier, and contributing to overall public health goals, but also climate action goals. That, in addition to that, in the last year, as we've seen, climate action was a priority issue and topic of discussion during the 2020 presidential election and is now a national priority of the current administration, setting targets for seriously curtailing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing reliance on fossil fuels, namely oil, gas, and coal. Even before we had the Biden administration elected into office, cities were leading the way in climate action for the last 4 years and even before. Taking steps to develop new building codes to reduce pollution in the built environment, including incentives and policies that either incentivize or require building electrification. And so in response to growing efforts by local jurisdictions to act to address the climate crisis and implement strong building codes, in February 2020, we saw the first piece of legislation that is similar to those in Missouri. The first preemption legislation was passed in the Arizona legislature directly in response to the city efforts by the city of Flagstaff developing their own climate action plan that involved pretty aggressive targets for energy efficiency in buildings and building electrification. And just I don't have the text included here. However, it is very strikingly similar to what is currently proposed in the Missouri legislature. And in the last year, so it's since February of 2020, we have seen bills just like the ones in the Missouri legislature come up all over the country. Similar legislation has passed in 4 states already: Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Tennessee, and is currently under consideration in 14 others, including Kansas and Missouri. And again, like across all states, we're seeing this fairly short legislation with an express goal of preventing cities from taking measures that either expressly prohibit the banning of gas or requiring new buildings to be all electric, or have the effect of. They also tend to be popping up in states where the legislature is more conservative, and in almost all instances backed by the nationwide gas lobby and some partners in states. And so just quickly kind of going over the goals of this legislation, the stated goal we see in a lot of the titles of these acts: energy choice, or balanced solutions, energy balance, energy freedom. In committee hearings regarding House Bill 488 and Senate Bill 230, you had some folks expressing concerns over some constituents who occasionally rely on like wood pellets or burning burning in their backyard, or other fuel sources, and worrying about them having that banned. This legislation would not do that. But there's also the worry about preventing Missourians from having the chance to choose how they cook their food or how they like to heat their home. And so no jurisdiction in Missouri has proposed banning gas hookups. We'll note, St. Louis adopted a goal of securing electricity from renewable sources by 2035 from wind and solar, but there's been no discussion of banning gas hookups for heating the home or for cooking. Although in other states, especially California, we've seen a lot of cities taking serious action to limit gas use in the home. I think about a dozen cities in California have passed codes that would require new buildings to be all electric. And we saw the city of Berkeley banned gas hookups in new buildings just in the last year. Some cities, like Salt Lake City in Utah, are offering incentives to developers to just encourage broader adoption of electric, all electric when building new buildings. And then some just through their climate action plans, like cities of Denver, are trying to also encourage broader electrification within the next decade. But yeah, but outside of California, I don't believe there is a city that has said, like, stated an intention to ban gas. But just working to increase energy efficiency measures and adopt stronger building codes, as Kansas City has done and has been the leader on in the past year. And so that gets us to kind of the potential impacts for legislation like this, but obviously definitely prohibited any city requiring in its building code that new buildings within the jurisdiction must be electric or are not built with gas hookups. But what's really another aspect of these bills, and what's really the concern, and really hasn't been answered fully yet, but could present serious challenges and at the very least serious regulatory uncertainty for cities and counties and local jurisdictions, is what this bill could have on adopting incentives for building electrification, adopting stronger building codes as the IECC is updated, which are aimed at safeguarding health and increasing energy efficiency, or what it could mean for setting a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or other policies that may have the effect of prohibiting or disincentivizing the use of gas in installing gas hookups in the built environment. And kind of just before we kind of get into some of the next steps, calls to action, and a brief assessment of these bills, just an update on kind of where things are right now. As of today, both pieces of legislation have been passed out of committee in both chambers of the Missouri legislature. The House version passed out of committee, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and just today, the Senate Commerce Committee passed 230, 10-0 out of committee, and we expect that the Senate will not vote on the floor until after the recess, so the recess this week. But so it could be as early as 2 weeks from now. We still expect that the House is going to vote sooner. It could be as early as this week, but we're still monitoring that closely. Yeah, just for a lot of the folks speaking on this is, Senator Burleson in the Senate Commerce Committee is the sponsor. Most of the folks giving testimony, it was lobbyists from the gas industry. Spire, I believe, went on the record in support. A few trade unions and other industry groups. And so just kind of a broad assessment, and I've included more details actually in the chat, an NPR article that was released just a couple weeks ago that does a really deep dive into this issue happening all across the country, and even kind of zooms in on a few cities and how it's been impacting their work in some ways, highlighting, I believe it's Douglas County and Lawrence in Kansas, but would encourage folks to take a look at that if they'd like to get more details. But just a pretty quick assessment looking at the text of this bill and seeing how the trajectory of the similar legislation across the country, it seems pretty clear. These bills are aimed at a problem that does not exist in Missouri. There are no jurisdictions that have proposed bans on the use of gas for heating and cooking in the home. But it is clear that these bills could cause serious impacts for cities' abilities to plan ahead and govern themselves and respond to the needs of their residents. Could prevent them from making decisions about their future in a way that is responsive to the needs of the constituents. And again, the regulatory uncertainty makes it harder for city officials to carry out their duties and make recommendations that are in line with the city's goals, but also in line with protecting the health and well-being of our residents. And then just finally, a lot of our conversations, especially in this commission and just in the environmental context, we talk about the potential for technological advancement We see improvements in energy efficiency in our building codes, every day, every year. And these bills would essentially negate the potential for technological advancement that's even currently underway, because these bills have no expiration date. If passed, it would be illegal for any city to ever potentially, make it illegal for them to ban, and potentially illegal for them to do anything that might too severely disincentivize an energy source that it's determined is not good for the health and well-being of the community. And so with that, we are, us at Sierra Club, and I know a number of folks, in Kansas City. I know, Bridget Sanderson with Environment Missouri has done an amazing amount of work on this. Missouri city leaders, stakeholders, and residents concerned should contact their senators and representatives as soon as possible. I also know that some cities have already spoken out against these bills, including Kansas City, and I want to just express thanks to Andy and Laura for sending a letter to the Senate Commerce Committee opposing SB 230 for many of the reasons that I've kind of outlined and briefly touched on here. And so it still encourage, even though these have passed out of committee, it is still worthwhile to present these concerns to our senators, and possibly work, if you can't, work with the partners in the business community, leveraging our contacts both as individuals and with our organizations. I know some folks have already spoken about potentially reaching out to some of our other utilities, Ameren and Evergy, just this kind of impacts a lot of work that our cities are doing with utilities on electrification. And with that, I'll try to keep it brief. That concludes my remarks, but I welcome the chance to answer any questions or provide further information.
Can you hear me?
You're kind of faint, but I can kind of hear you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the highly informative presentation. I appreciate that. The first thought that springs to mind is there any pushback from utilities that are away methane and gas production in terms of, pushing against this from the other businesses side, from the energy, their perspective?
You're kind of coming in a little faint.
Okay, let me see if I can change that. Hold on one second. So I was just thinking that Evergy is moving strongly towards renewable energy sources. Are renewable energy organizations and companies that are moving towards that applying any kind of defense against this kind of lobbying by natural gas?
In Missouri, I'm not aware of at least public-facing efforts by Evergy or Ameren or presenting any kind of opposition to this bill. I've heard, nothing substantial other than some rumors. Like I know that this information has been shared with our other utilities, and I know in other contexts, I think in California, obviously the major gas utilities in California were vehemently opposed to these efforts by cities, but I think in certain circumstances, electric utilities certainly did not oppose. Sorry, even if they didn't advocate for the efforts specifically, like go all electric, they weren't supporting efforts to prevent cities from taking action if it meant incentivizing electrification.
Okay, and then I'm putting another question in the chat.
Billy, thank you for your presentation and for bringing attention to this issue. I think one question that I have is there any kind of, is is the kind of outpouring of opposition to this from our region, is it largely limited to Kansas City? Is there clear support from some of the other suburban places? Maybe there's additional ways that we can push some of those communities to contact their elected officials in opposition of this as well.
Thank you so much, Michael. So really quick, I saw that Ben popping his question in the chat. To answer your question, Ben, I don't think it will. Like there's still is a chance that even if it's regulating it as a pollutant or taking energy efficiency measures or incentivizing electrification or another alternative that has the effect of prohibiting this, that it's still unclear because I have not seen any sort of litigation on this yet, but there are a lot of concerns that even like those measures that are squarely focused on public health, energy efficiency, they could be preempted by the state law. Thank you, Emily, also for putting that mention in the chat regarding Kansas. And Michael, on your question, and thank you. I was actually just about to bring Bridget in. Thank you for that additional follow-up. I am aware of, I believe Columbia had submitted opposition to members of the Senate committee. The City of Independence, I believe, had submitted a testimony, and I know some regulators in Kansas, I think it was Ms. Jasmine Moore at the Douglas County and City of Lawrence, are working to oppose this. And so, and for encouraging folks in the region, I think like this is like this type. I feel like this legislation it like squarely contradicts the efforts by Climate Action KC that are focusing on what can cities do to take action in the Kansas City region. This could potentially severely limit that work, and so I think it is important for more cities to speak out, especially those who are part of these ongoing efforts in the region. And I know Bridget has been connected with a lot of folks, working with folks in the House and in the Senate, and reaching out to cities in the area, encouraging them to take action. And Bridget, if you have it handy, a link to your op-ed in the Missouri Times. I'm sure folks here would love to see if you want to type it in the chat, but if you want to add any more information about what are other cities doing or how can we get them more connected?
Yeah, I'm just going to hop in really fast, Billy. You did a great job presenting this. But just back to Michael's question about other regional elected officials. Essentially, at this point, it's been Sierra Club and Environment Missouri working in opposition of this bill. And we have been focusing on the Democratic strongholds because they are the ones who have climate targets. And also, we think that within the Senate, at least, we could get it to be filibustered. So that's why we're asking everybody within the Democratic cities of Missouri to reach out. So he's correct that Independence Missouri told us that they were going to send a lobbyist to oppose this bill. A couple of city councilors in St. Louis, and then, yeah, of course, Kansas City and Columbia also made statements. And so we'll be working with the Senate hearing coming up in a week or so, talking with even more elected officials within those strongholds and also reaching out to some Springfield city councilors as well. But great job, Billy.
Well, thank you, Bridget. And just to follow up then on that, if it sounds like our best chance to kind of stop this is in the Senate, are there any members of the Kansas City delegation at this point who have not publicly said that they will work to oppose this measure?
I'm not sure if that was directed towards me or towards Billy, but we haven't heard back from any city councilors in Kansas City. The city manager did reach out, and we were just, he I wasn't able to get him on the phone to explain this bill, but Billy did a great job chatting with Andy and Laura about this. So yeah, we haven't had enough of the locally elected city officials. I've also talked with the counterparts, the House of Representatives, to discuss this with their senator counterparts. So we've had a few of those people reach out to their senators as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll echo that. Thanks to folks at OAQ for getting a letter out, especially on such short notice ahead of last week's committee hearing. And I'll see if I can dig that up, or if we want to include it in any sort of post-meeting notes, if folks want to take a look. And yeah, I think at this point, it's really just the more folks that are senators, and at this point, like the only, like kind of the last opportunity for this to be stopped is if there was a filibuster, or like just a massive effort kind of behind the scenes just to convince the senators one-on-one. And so the more folks they're hearing from, the better will be, whether it's so especially your power as commissioners, but also just kind of as leaders in the community. If this is a position, if this is something that your boards, your organizations might be interested in submitting letters on, or making phone calls, or taking a position on, anything can be helpful at this point. And again, as Michael suggested, like connecting with, other city leaders who are trying to explore ways to take action. Recently the Casey area climate action plan was submitted with some recommendations and targets. Folks who are starting to review that. This kind of flies in the face of that work that's been done. And so, they really need to hear from folks, the cities who are doing the work of advancing climate solutions and protecting human health. I'm trying to just check through the chat to see if there's anything else. DJ, I see your comment about the city-owned utilities. Like, again, that is a very valid concern, like the impact even on city-owned utilities. This is incredibly broad language with no end limit. So it's unclear what that impact would be, but it doesn't look good.
Billy and Bridget, this is a different bill, but the one I've been making phone calls about last week was SB 178. Do you guys have any idea where that one's going? It's the one on solar.
I'm sorry, what was this bill?
SB 178. It was defeated in the House. It's about solar fees.
Is this the net metering bill? I'm sorry, I've been deep in the legislative session. Yeah, I don't. I have been really tunnel visioned on this bill, and so I know that it was defeated in the House. I don't know if there was a vote today, honestly, on this bill. So Billy might have a little bit more information on that.
Unfortunately, I don't. Be happy to track down.
So we should switch gears and start making phone calls on this latest one.
Well, I thank everyone for this discussion, and I hope we can all follow up with our state elected officials. Is there any other comment on this before we move on? Andy was going to tell us about some grant opportunities that OEQ is looking at.
Ooh, yay.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, and thank you all for joining us on Teams. I was given the word from our city manager that we were more or less asked not to use Zoom any further for any more of our commissions and for our particular city meetings. So this was our next option. This is part of our existing license and what we have in place with Microsoft. So thank you for all adapting to this platform. If you haven't used this before, hopefully we're going to make it work. So yeah, I just wanted to put this on the agenda. I talked to Carol about this. And also I might mention, if you can go on mute, because I'm getting a lot of ruffling and other sounds. But one of the things I asked Carol about was we're about grant opportunities. And one things that our office has noticed the past week or two is the fair number of opportunities that have been coming down and available for us to look at, some of which the city could apply for directly, and others we would need to partner with others to take the lead on. But it kind of spurred a bigger conversation in our office about, one of the issues we have in OEQ is staffing. There are just not enough of us to keep on top of all of what's going on out there. Staff, Laura and Jerry, myself and Chris, Rachel, the whole group, we're doing our best to kind of move forward with the climate action planning process, which I'll cover a little bit later in our OEQ report. But there's certainly a lot of other things that we're doing as well. And one of the things I asked Carol about was, with all of these grant opportunities, and I don't foresee that they're going to be slowing down anytime soon with the new administration, is there any room in the EMC that possibly could help support OEQ in terms of vetting out some of these grant opportunities? So I know you have various committees or groups that you put together. So I might ask, if the commission would consider possibly a group of folks that might have an interest in helping OEQ kind of vet out various grant opportunities as they present themselves. And I'm not quite sure fully how that looks, but we could certainly use some extra eyes on some of this stuff. So that's kind of how I'm going to open this conversation. I did list 3 grant opportunities. It's since grown to 4 since we posted the agenda. And I know like some of them, like the biochar project, we knew that Marty might get excited about something like that. We've also got the environmental justice grant that's come available. We've got the Energy Innovation Fund through the USDN, which is all about solar. And so there's some interesting projects that we might be able to look at in that regard. And then Laura, I'd asked Laura if there's a 4th one that she brought to my attention earlier today that I asked her to kind of bring up here as well. So I don't know how much time I wanted to burn up in the meeting today, because I know we have other things we want to cover in the agenda, but I just kind of want to throw that idea out there and see where the commission wanted to take it. And Laura, maybe you might want to just speak to that 4th grant opportunity, just to kind of put that out there as well, because it's not directly on the agenda.
Yeah, and the 4th one, which we can email out, it's a Climate Justice for All grant application. So pretty much this particular one needs to go to a grassroots, youth, faith-based, some sort of organization that is led by people of color or directly serving people of color. And it's up to $20,000 to help just foster work for those organizations. And then they get to actually be part of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps training as well. So if anybody knows of an organization like that in Kansas City, because that $20,000 could go a really long way towards the equity focus of our climate plan that we could not get the funding for in this particular situation. So translators and daycare and food at meetings for folks within the urban core and our LifeX communities to be there. And then that extra leadership to help our neighborhoods actually really take the lead and really understand that they do have an active role in this process would be huge. So if you know any group that would be interested in being a part of that grant, I would happily work with them to make sure all of the paperwork was in order. And I will put the link to it here. And I see Carl. Hey, Carl. Yeah. You may be the one because you're here and you know this stuff.
Yeah, and Laura, I'd be interested in too. I would tell you that we have a full-time grant writer, or he's on staff full-time. He doesn't spend all his stuff. Warren Adams, love it. He knows a lot about energy. He knows a lot about solar. So anything with that translation, you're right. That's right up our alley. Something in the communities of color, which is us in the urban core, as well as the Latinx community of West Side. So yes. Yeah, I'd be interested in any kind of partnering where there's an opportunity to partner, and we have the resource of Warren to write grants. So yeah, so if there's something that comes across that solar sounds like us too. So we're interested in any kind of more expansion of solar. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And this particular one, I mean, whatever you guys want to do, but if we can use it to further the work of the climate planning and really dig, a deep dive into those neighborhoods, I would love that. And then as far as the EPA Environmental Justice Grant goes, wherever you guys want to run with that, the city will be a partner and leverage all our climate work that's going on right now to help you all get that funding. So just know we're here for that.
How can I find out more about the biochar thing?
So I sent out what I think what we'll do here at the end of this meeting is we'll send out the information for each of these grant opportunities, so everybody can kind of take a closer look at them and kind of see what they might be able to identify with. And we'd be happy to facilitate further conversations. You got to kind of look at the due dates on some of these. Some of them are coming up pretty quickly. At least getting a notice of interest in or something along those lines. So there are two of them where we would need an outside organization to take the lead on, and then there are some, particularly the Energy Innovation Fund and the Biochar Project. I think that's where the city would actually take the lead, but we would need partners to help us with that. So starting out, we can at least get out the applications and the materials that we have, so you can all look at that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Emily, your question on DEI funding?
Oh, sorry. I just want to make sure you mentioned, I know through the climate protection plan, I think it was through a bank, or I know Bridging the Gap help you secure it funding to support the climate protection plan. Is that where you mentioned that's not available anymore?
I think Bridging the Gap received they had gone for two different grants. They received some foundation funding, I believe, to work with youth specifically on the climate planning process. And that's not directly related to Kansas City. I believe that's Climate Action KC. So it's partially Kansas City, but also regional as well. They did not get the other funding they were trying to get for that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure I had it straight. Thank you.
No worries. And email me anytime, Emily. We need to talk anyway.
Okay, sounds good.
Can you guys hear me any better?
Yes, sound great.
Okay, good. So when you first started talking about this, Andy, so are you looking for someone to do some pro bono, like sifting through grants and potentially working on applying for different things too?
So I don't know that I had a concrete idea in terms of not necessarily applying, but it's the sifting part of it, I think, from our perspective.
Sure.
It takes time to read through those documents, to do the research on those. And just in the past week, between myself, Laura, Jerry, we're trying to get the climate action plan off the ground and moving forward. But when these grant opportunities come at us and you look at the short timeline that there is on these, it's a distraction from us. And we don't want to lose out on an opportunity to bring, dollars to Kansas City. And I'm also trying to balance that balance of trying to get the plan going so that we identify the strategies that are best suited for Kansas City and then focus on those strategies rather than going after the strategies or the projects now that may not make it into our climate action plan. But I'd also, you don't want to leave dollars on the table if you can help it. So it's kind of like this, I go back and forth, but certainly I think it's helpful to us that if we had some other sets of eyes, if there were commissioners that were interested in, vetting some of this stuff, if we sent you what we get and say, hey, is this something viable for OEQ, or is this from a non-city taking the lead perspective? I think that could be helpful to us.
So I actually have a friend who was an on-staff grant writer for the KC rep who has moved into a professional freelance career.
Okay.
And she's actually been really successful. She's one of those stories where she got thrown into a total piece of chaos because obviously the theater is shut down. So she didn't really have a lot of work to do, or they didn't have a lot of work to do. So they cut her from the staff. But she's been really successful, and she might even be able to help you guys kind of focus that, process a little bit. So she's not a member of the Environmental Management Commission, but she is deeply dedicated to the stuff that we work on.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, certainly worth pursuing any of that, those kinds of leads or connections. I'm not necessarily opposed to bringing on a contractor or something to help us with that. And we've had these conversations just within the city overall in terms of, it's unfortunate, we as a city, we don't have dedicated grant writers per se. I mean, some departments might have that, but many do not. We have somebody that helps facilitate grants for the city, but they don't write them for us. We have to do the legwork in doing that, and all they do is kind of help coordinate the work we're doing with what's going on in finance. So that conversation has happened in terms of, boy, it would be great if we had some folks in the city that could actually do the grant writing for us to go after those big dollars, and takes the burden off of the staff that are trying to do the day-to-day operations as well as implement the programs,
Sure. This is her bread and butter. I mean, so I'm happy to put you in touch with her, and then I think that she might just do it pro bono, but I'll kind of let you guys have that conversation.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Well,
Sure.
and
No, I'd like to. This is Scott here. I'd like to look at the Energy Innovation Fund, one that was mentioned anyway. Who knows? Without knowing anything about it, I don't know where it will go, but I'd like to see it and see what might fit for people in my circles.
Right. No, certainly, I appreciate it. And some of them are not big dollar grants. Some of them are fairly small. So, it's kind of like, Laura and I talk about the effort that it takes to do a grant within the city with our administrative processes. It's almost, is it worth that kind of effort for a $20,000 grant or whatever? So, but anyways, yeah, we'll send out each of the 4 so that everybody can see them. And then if something resonates with any of you, then we can have further conversations and maybe hone in on something that we might want to do.
And just to clarify, Ben, so if the neighborhoods, if somebody in the city has a great idea, I've been through many grant writing seminars and I've written some successful grants. I'm fine with writing it. A lot of the time it's just, we don't want to be the ones that are like, this is a great idea, and trying to hand it off to a community partner that doesn't own it. We want them to own it, and then we support it. I've supported grants by writing them for community groups before, but they, we want them to own it, get the money, build capacity within their organizations too. That's the ultimate goal. We don't, we're not going to build a whole lot of capacity in OEQ. Now, if we get a whole lot of grants, we'll work with the neighborhood. Maybe we can grab a new couple of people to work for us, but the ultimate goal is to help the neighborhoods.
Sure.
Okay. Well, any other comments from the commissioners? It was just kind of an open-ended conversation. Just kind of want to get your thoughts.
Andy, I think it was a good thing to bring up, and I hope as you get subsequent applications, if you want to contact some commissioners directly, even outside of meetings, I think you should just go ahead and do that, and try to use us as best you can to facilitate working through these things.
All right, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, Laura, are you ready to talk about the City Nature Challenge?
Did I not? Was that? Oh, wow. I thought I got that one out last time. Is that one on the schedule for today?
It is.
Okay. Well, the City Nature Challenge. So Kansas City is partnering with the Kansas City Zoo this year to participate in the City Nature Challenge. This is an international BioBlitz. For those of you that are familiar with BioBlitz. Oh, I saw Molly's head perk up there. It was started actually as a rivalry between 2 museums in California, and they had so much fun that it grew to be cities throughout California, then it grew across the nation, then Bolivia was interested, and the next thing you know, it's worldwide. So pretty much what this is the week after Earth Day, so it falls on April, I think it starts the 26th and runs through May 3rd. They're asking people within the region, it's not just Kansas City, to download the iNaturalist app and then just take pictures of wildlife that they find within just anywhere around them. So We're using it as an excuse to get people outside. We're using it as an excuse to, get people on trails and in parks and just out enjoying spring and nature, but also putting this all together. And I'm sorry, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to my agenda. So I'm trying to let me share my screen with you guys here real quick. And so, are you all seeing my screen yet?
Yeah. Yep. Yes.
So
You're good.
You can see these are all the participating cities that are participating in the 2021 City Nature Challenge, which has its own website. And I'm going to scroll, so close your eyes while I get down here, because we are the Greater Kansas City region. And unfortunately, I don't have the other one bookmarked, so I have to do it this way and get down here to us. It's so awesome. There are so many. But you can actually view our site. This will take you directly to our iNaturalist site for the City Nature Challenge. And we've actually participated through the zoo for like 3 years now, but this is the first year they're trying to make it bigger and have a bigger reach. So we've reached out to about 30 partners now, and we have about 25 on board, and that includes nature centers and science cities on board, Bridging the Gap, Heartland Conservation Alliance. We're trying to grab as many partners as we can to help get the word out about this. So once people download the iNaturalist app to their phone, they can link up to our iNaturalist site right here. Through signing up or just logging in and seeing what's in the area, and it will show the City Nature Challenge. And then all they have to do is take pictures. It automatically take pictures and send it back to iNaturalist. So if they get a picture of a butterfly, when they click in iNaturalist, it will actually show maybe if it's a pretty common thing like a monarch, it will show an option that says, do you know what type of butterfly this is? This looks like it could be a monarch or a swallowtail. And then, so if you know what it is, you can click on it. But everything that at the end of the week when they close this down, anything that hasn't been, I'm sorry, it's April 30th through May 3rd. Anything that hasn't been specifically identified will be identified by a naturalist with one of the hundreds of museums that's participating in this. And through that, they will get an idea of the flora and fauna that is available in Kansas City, Missouri. So if you look in Kansas City, Missouri right now, we've had over 20,000 observations of different plants and animals. So far, this is from past BioBlitzes, as well as some interspecies projects going on with the Audubon Society and some of the nature centers. But you can actually scroll into iNaturalist and click on any of these various things and see what was identified and where and when. There was a crow identified on January 29th. If you scroll in to the iNaturalist app, you'll notice that we have some areas with really high observations and then some areas with really low observations. And we're looking to try to get some more observations in those areas that may not have been as frequently populated in the past. So if we've got parks or I don't know, a whole area like West Side Gloria where you've got people out walking trails and identifying wildlife, that'd be great. The only requirements are they don't like roadkill, they'll take it because sometimes, sadly enough, roadkill might be a threatened or endangered species. But for the most part, they prefer living things and they prefer things that are found in the wild. They don't want pictures of your pets or the hydrangeas that you planted in your backyard. All right. And that's what I have on the City Nature Challenge. If you all would like to get involved, you can email me directly. I'm sure Molly's already doing this. And we will put you on a Zoom call. We're going to have one later this month. We haven't scheduled it yet, just to kind of get all the volunteers on the same page, get our website going. And yeah, we'd love any support you guys have.
So it's just, you can go and it's literally just any type of species, subtracting dead things and things that you purchase on the internet, right?
Correct. So plants and animals that you see, I mean, if you want to show the dandelion that's growing in the right of way in front of your house, that's fine. But if you want to go out and really like get into the woods somewhere off of the Blue River Glades and try to find some really cool insects, you can do that too. So especially if you have a school group, we're targeting a lot of school groups and neighborhood groups to kind of do deep dives in their area, of course, within the constraints of COVID. Be careful, wear your mask.
No, I was thinking like everybody needs to get out.
Right.
Like specifically because of COVID, this might be a fun opportunity for adult kids to get out there and start observing some things too.
100%. We've really got the Audubon Society excited about this. The only issue is they don't want a whole bunch of digital stuff. They want a flyer they can hand out to their folks. So we're trying to get one put together. I mean, they're going to have to figure out iNaturalist on your phone. And that's another thing. If you've got the ability, if your group or whatever has the ability to kind of do a little training for some of our less tech savvy folks on how to download an app on their phone and then take pictures with iNaturalist, I think that's usually the big push the zoo has had. They've done that for people in the zoo before, but with COVID, it's kind of having those events with gathering a lot of people. We're trying to avoid that. So
I can imagine trying to do like a tech orientation through a Zoom call is just impossible.
Thankfully, there are some YouTube videos that kind of walk everyone through this, and I'm trying to get the zoo doesn't have the bandwidth right now to put up a website, but I'm trying to get our guys here at Kansas City to put up a website so people can just click on those videos and look through it. And Molly asked if they will accept observations at other times. So this particular BioBlitz is only that April 30th through May 3rd. They're trying to get a snapshot in time of flora and fauna all over the world. However, Kansas City's through iNaturalist, you can submit something at any time through iNaturalist. It won't be counted in this BioBlitz specifically unless it's during that week. But yeah, you can. There's hundreds of Kansas City groups. Lakeside Nature Center has a good one. The Monarchs and Deep Roots all have pages. So you can always submit for Kansas City at any time.
So Laura, I may have missed, did you have a link or a website that's set up, or what was the way to get plugged in, find out more?
We haven't set up our specific website yet. So, we haven't set up our informational website yet, but right now, here is the link I've just put the link to our Kansas City specific iNaturalist page. And here is the link to the full City Nature Challenge, which this particular site, especially if you're an educator, has educational resources and kind of walks you through the process if you were just to walk off the street and want to do this and know nothing about your city, that citynaturechallenge.org. So anybody can go there to learn about the process and then click specifically on our city, either through that website or through the other link I sent you. You do have to sign up specifically for iNaturalist and on our iNaturalist page to participate in the BioBlitz. So it has to be uploaded specifically to this particular BioBlitz. And that is actually really, strangely enough, very easy to figure out in iNaturalist once you're there. It's a pretty easy system to work in.
Thank you, Laura. The next item on our agenda is EMC Next Steps. And this item was put in here largely to create an opportunity to continue the discussion that Bob has been leading the past few months. But I believe Ben has something he wanted to share.
Yeah, I sent out a draft of a letter to Andy, and it was kind of last minute. And then he would have sent that out to the entire commission. And essentially, it's just a letter to recommend that the city take action to what it's previously stated, which is that sustainability should be foremost in its mind when it looks into any other city activities or any development that it does. And so I don't know how many people actually had a chance to read the letter or to digest it at all. So yeah, I don't know. This is hard to do over Zoom because everybody has to say something, I guess. Did anybody read the letter?
Hey, it's DJ. I read the letter. I appreciate you putting it together. I had a couple questions. The first one is, would this apply to just development that receives incentives from the city, or is it all development in the city?
No, I mean, so it is a draft. I'm kind of teasing out the logistics of that, but in my mind, it's everything that the city engages in or approves, essentially. So, you know, you would take this, and that's not to say that this is like a pass-fail thing where, you know, if you have something that someone wants to do, unless it meets the sustainability criteria, there's no possible way that it's ever going to happen. You know, I think that is probably a little bit too prohibitive, but I do like the idea of a stick and carrot approach in which, you know, yes, if you're pursuing something that's going to expand our footprint, exacerbate our carbon footprint, if it's in a method that is terribly wasteful and you haven't put a lot of thought into the efficiency of the project, the materials that you're using, or the impact to our society and to the communities that are involved, why are we doing it? You know? So yeah, to answer your question, it's not just the stuff that the city is providing incentives for, but it's anything that it touches, any developments that we're doing as a community.
So I guess my second question would then be, it's kind of a legal one. I don't know if Elward's on the call, but you know, if we were to like you know, officially send this out as a commission, it probably would have to pass the law review muster. The thing that came to mind is this too far reaching, like the point system and stuff, you know, to the point that, you know, it's basically a taking, you know, on the part of the city for, you know, an individual's, you know, project, whatever that might be. So that was a question that I had, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer that, but you know, Elward, I know like Katie Chandler I work with, who kind of handles the development type review for the law department, might be somebody that would probably want to have their eyes on it.
DJ, I didn't hear that last thing that you said. If this is potentially a what?
A taking?
Nope, not following.
Legal term.
It's somehow taking your property.
Yeah,
Still
so
not
like
following. I'm so sorry.
It's basically like,
so I would.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you can give me an example.
Ben, it's used most closely with the term eminent domain.
Sure.
So I mean, if eminent domain is exercised in some people's minds, that's a property taking. You're in essence losing your rights to the property for less than what you think is an appropriate compensation.
I'm not, well, I mean, again, that is a legal question, but I was thinking, so, you know, this is really looking at the built environment and how we are developing as a city in a material and process sense in a similar kind of fashion as cap and trade, where, you know, if you have a tax on the amount of carbon emissions that are being put out there, or you can get a credit for something. But this is specifically looking at the processes that we're doing in order to produce and consume energy in the first place. So to answer your question, DJ, I guess I need to go to law school in order to figure that out. But to me, it would be a fee, wouldn't necessarily be taking.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into the weeds on the legalese, I think just the biggest thing that I had is I love the concept, you know, and the thought process behind it. I would just probably want, you know, Elward to probably put his eyes and ears on it before we officially adopt it as a commission.
You guys, Professor Wagner says that he is teaching planning law right now. A taking is not eminent domain. The taking is when people claim inverse condemnation. And I would have to answer that question about inverse condemnation to even understand that as well.
So that's all
I'm
legalese.
just not following why this would be a taking. Can DJ explain that to me?
I'm not a real estate attorney. I'm a litigator, but I'm just contemplating like an argument. Say you got somebody, the way the letter read, I was a little confused if because it's not just applicable to incentives. If it's any development in the city, say you want to renovate your house, you want to have an addition to your home that would require to go through the city for permitting, and you're not able to obtain that permit because you aren't designing parts of it as energy efficient. So is the government doing something that is too far in its overreach, that is basically inhibiting your property, the value of your home so much that they would consider it, that you could raise an argument to claim that it's a taking? I'm just throwing that out there. It's not what I believe. Because it was, like I said, without just incentives being targeted on this, I just think that it would make sense to make sure that we're not sending anything to the council that the law department is going to turn around and tell them, hey, like, you can't do this. That makes sense.
Yes, of course. And I hear what you're saying. To me, and this is without having any background in formal law, the reason that I would say no to that as a layman is that this is not a requirement in order to get a permit to be approved. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you can still get something approved. Like if it goes through the processes that we currently have, yes, that's fine, but we have this additional structure on top of it that says, if this is within the city limits, but it's like breaking new ground and it's destroying half a forest to do it and requiring new hookups into different energy uses. And then also, like, this kind of dovetails into what Billy Davies was talking about earlier with the legislation that's trying to get passed in the Missouri Senate. What if we're prohibited from saying this because it would chill the ability for a homeowner to hook up a natural gas line to something? And so we're disincentivizing certain uses of energy and certain processes that we can't do anymore. I mean, like, I absolutely understand what you're saying, but again, this is just to discourage certain behaviors and processes and a lack of work. I mean, one of the things that kills me about this entire conversation is that none of this stuff that we're trying to do is impossible. It just takes time and it takes energy by humans. Like, it's going to require people learning some stuff and learning different processes. But it's not going to be something that would stand in the way of work. It would just change the way it's being done.
Hey, Ben, it's Nate. When I hear point system, growing up in an area that had a lot of confined animal feeding operations, CAFOs that used a point system, and you talking about learning, sort of, people need to learn a new system. A lot of times that point system, and it takes an extreme amount of precision and sort of thinking on adopting a point system, is that it can create a lot of either perverse incentives or policy leakage, and basically you will allow enough sort of gaming of the system or loopholes for people to be able to use a point system for their own purposes in development. I also am unclear about why there's a prioritization of retrofits over new builds, because retrofits actually, like, if you're talking about new development, a lot of your long-term energy gains are usually pent up in new developments. So I don't know if retrofits necessarily get sort of bonus point on there. Mm-hmm. And then I think I had some other language changes that I would probably proposed before being more comfortable with, but glaringly absent is there's absolutely no sort of discussion on what this means for, you know, our Black and Latinx communities in Kansas City. Does this harm or does this help? There's literally no discussion of the racial and equity implications.
The very first piece of it is social equity.
Yeah, but like you go on to explicate the point system later on, you don't sort of explicate what the implications are of the point system. Like you can say something, sure, you can say something about social and racial equity, but you need to actually go into sort of a deeper policy analysis of what that looks like. Would this inhibit or accelerate development, new development or retrofits of in communities of color? If it inhibits it, what is sort of what is the balancing for that? Like how are you able to get extra resources to help that, you know, to close those gaps?
So yeah, I mean, I'll gladly take the criticism about retrofits versus new builds. I mean, all of that language and then every single piece of that needs to be built out. Okay, you're not like pointing out anything that I don't know already. But again, this is the first draft of an idea to try to get some kind of overarching focus in process. You know, and like I said in the letter itself, the scattershot approach that we've been going about with our attempts to get to a place of safety, it's like it's causing an increasing amount of anxiety for me personally, because it doesn't seem to have any kind of coherent map on it. And also to that point, the roadmap that we're hiring out a firm to create for us and that we're getting the Brindle Group to do, you know, I don't want that to just be a piece of paper. I don't want that to just be a study that gets printed out and put in an envelope and then filed away to be forgotten forever. So
Ben, yeah, I appreciate that, Ben. If I could jump in real quick, in the context of the plan, that for us in our office is a vital component of moving forward with strategies to hitting the targets that were adopted in the 05 resolution. And I think it's worth noting that your point regarding development is well taken, and I think the mayor recognizes that as a big issue, because if you watch the TIO committee that heard our presentation on the climate action plan when we went in front of that committee to request funding and approval of the contract with Brendel, the mayor's response was in regards to development, and he was hoping that the climate action plan that we develop would address a strategy or two or more in regards to future developments. So I'm just kind of giving you that context of what happened during that particular committee meeting, that we're aware of the development issue, that we've talked about it in-house, but I'd also, the commission can do whatever it wants in terms of sending a letter to the mayor, but I think, you know, the mayor was recognizing that hopefully this will be vetted through the climate action planning process with input from the community, from the stakeholders, to kind of identify those strategies and go forth from there. So again, this is, and I'm always on the fence about this in terms of, you know, the cart in front of the horse kind of analogy, in the sense that you're sort of getting ahead of the climate action plan with this particular proposal. And you guys and the commission can certainly move forward with that. But in some context, I would hope you would take this idea and run it through the climate action planning process, through the teams, and let the consultant do the data analysis and all that to see if this is a strategy that moving forward, that we can then take, you know, that plan is not going to just sit on the table. It's going to be a driving force for us, but that's also going to go to the council for them to approve it. If they approve that plan, that's our policy. That's what we're moving forward with. So that's where I would like to put the emphasis there. Not that you can't send a letter, you certainly can, but the climate action planning process is sort of your way to drive those particular strategies forward if you choose to use it.
I would also like to make a couple of comments. You know, one of the things that we have used point systems for in the past is not really to measure things as much as it is to get people to think differently and then to act differently instead of it being a checkbox yes or no. And we've done that on the transportation plan. LEAD works that way. It gets people to go through a process of thinking about how they could do something better and improving their product. And even the tool that the city uses for capital improvements. Can you remind me what the name of that is? Anyway, there's an evaluation tool that they use for capital improvements that takes them through the thought process of whether or not they can use native landscaping and how they can have multiple benefits. So I'm thinking that there may be some examples of point systems that help people think through the impacts of their proposals in ways that cause them to improve what they intend to do. And hopefully our consultant will have some knowledge of what has been done other places. And I would like to see us take full advantage of that and also get the benefit of kind of the more detailed thinking about how you would express these actually admirable goals in specific enough ways that people could make them actionable, that it would stimulate them to do things differently. So that my suggestion would be to share this information in this form with the consultant when they come on board and to ask them to help us figure out how to stimulate the responses we want to see to the climate planning.
Wow. Carol, I think you got some great ideas there for the discussion. Because one of my key questions was, right, what is the basis for the point system? You know, is there any historical thing that we can compare that to and say use as a model? And I don't have any point of reference there, and that's why if a consultant's already got some tools that they're familiar with that they could lay out, that would be seems like it's worthwhile to do.
Yeah, I mean, and to answer Scott first and then kind of respond to Carol second. The thing that kind of spurred this idea was a couple of articles that Joseph Nichols sent to me just about incorporation of sustainability and passive house design in HUD incentivized building in Pennsylvania, and just adding, a criteria that impacted the point system and approval for new developments that came from that specific funding source increased the number of submissions that met those criteria because it became something that people went for in the first place. And then when I started writing the letter out, it just didn't seem like enough. Not just like the type of the efficiency that we're looking for, but if we're looking at from a holistic citywide perspective, to Carol's point, second, yeah, I mean, like, I kind of end the letter by saying that there's going to have to be some kind of communication component. There's going to have to be some kind of really big, and I think that Molly and I have been pushing for this for years now, some much larger pandemic style communication tool that brings people on board into the kinds of changes in behavior that we're going to be looking for in the future.
That's why.
Yes. I mean, point systems, fantastic. But if it can be spurred to make that process something that people actually adopt and feel excited about instead of push away from and feel mortified over, you know, that's always the prime objective. Molly, were you going to say something?
Oh, I had a couple of things. I read it and I thought it was great. It gets a little whiffly at the end. But and I also thought it needed some, you know, the point system is pretty specific, but a much more specific kind of focus to it. But I do see that. How do we balance that with integrating with Brindle, and yet if the city council is making recommendations and considering reforms now, what is the appropriate way to influence that conversation?
I'm still here. I'm just powering my computer.
Annie might have something to say on that. Because I get that's, you know, Brindle's going to do this, and DJ has pointed out in the past that we don't need new regulations. We have to enforce the ones we have. So I imagine that Brindle's also going to be looking at that interplay as well. And then I put up this figure for everyone because this is what's been on my mind in a number of talks I've been giving, but it outlines the difference between an increase between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees temperature. And what I find is the vast majority of people go, oh, I sit at the beach and it's 110 and it's 70 that night, and you know, what's a half a degree? And they don't understand the difference between daily temperature being what you're doing in your cab of your car, heating it up, turning the AC on, and the optimum temperature of your engine. You just can't crank up your engine heat, it's going to blow up. And so they don't understand that half a degree is enormous. And so this actually lays out what happens to vertebrates, and you know, it's exponential. So between 1.5 and 2, you double the amount of species loss among plants. Mm-hmm. But the new reports are coming out all the time. Jerry, you may have seen this. There's a new Nature report out last week that says we need pandemic level shutdowns every 2 years to even hit 2 degrees. Like, we're past making 1.5. If we get up into 3.5 and beyond that, we are into seriously unlivable conditions. And so we've talked about this for years here. How do we get this information out in a digestible form to the public? That's our pandemic moment. How do we make this pandemic scale?
How do you make saving the world sexy?
So, Andy, do you have a sense of what City Council is working on, and if they're working on these reforms now, how do we have this support letter of let's take this more seriously versus waiting for the Brindle?
Do you mind if I hop in real quick, Molly and Andy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So I just wanted to clarify one thing. I definitely, you may sound a little like a Republican there saying we need to just enforce the regulations we have. I think we do need more structure and regulatory structure when it comes to a lot of things. About what they're working on right now, I know somebody mentioned Councilwoman Robinson. The City Council just did pass a big reform when it came to the advanced KC scorecard, which deals with incentives, but it's any development tied to an incentive, they're going to be going back and basically recalibrating the scorecard for that. So this letter, I mean, I think it's well timed. If it's targeted just to projects that have an incentive attached to it, I mean, I think you get some out the door, you know, tomorrow, you know, with what's in here right now. I think where my bigger concern was kind of it touching any single thing that the city's involved in and where it could run into some issues.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I'm certainly not trying to dissuade the commission from sending that letter either. I wanted to make sure you were aware of what the mayor expressed with us in his hopes of the climate action planning process in regards to the development process. So that was just, I was offering that as another avenue for you to pursue this, to be involved and engaged in that process, to have it vetted that way. And, our expectation is to engage the council, engage city departments, engage, of course, the community. So it's a broader stakeholder involvement in that process.
And no, I mean, I didn't think that you were trying to dissuade anything, and to kind of, Andy, like the cart and the horse analogy, like at the rate that things are happening now with the way that the world feels, I mean, just push the cart down the hill and send the horse after it. Like anything we can do to get some action going with this kind of stuff is really.
Well, and I certainly understand that it's coming more from the perspective of, as a manager or a director over a small staff, trying to keep them focused on those things where we can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kid you not, we are all excited to get started on so many different projects, but you have to manage the time we have allotted to us. And so when you get involved in these grants or these projects, it takes us off of getting that plan accomplished and done, because that is for the money that we're spending on that. It's going to take a lot more staff time to get it to happen, because we kind of had to cut the budget a little bit to get what we wanted, just meaning we're doing more in-house than we normally would. So that's my analogy in reference to how we're dealing with the resources we have available to us. I'm not saying you as a community don't go crazy, go for it. It's just it's overwhelming at times, all the opportunities and all the things we want to get involved with. But I also, one of the things, listening in with other cities that I do networking with, a point was made that, sometimes when you are focusing on a specific project that you think is going to make a difference on your greenhouse gas reductions or other objectives or goals, when you actually do the data analysis, sometimes you find out you're on the wrong track. You've got the ladder on the wrong wall, or it's the wrong strategy. So that's why, I'm trying to kind of keep us focused to a data-driven analysis of the strategies before we start spending resources to tackle a strategy that looks great, it's flashy, it's sexy, but it's not the right strategy for Kansas City. So that's where I was coming from.
Right. And yes, so that's
maybe
that's
it's two things. Ben, maybe it's a letter that goes out to council saying, we really, really have to stay on track and focus, and this has to be absolutely the focus of the city going forward. And then you get a specific rating system or something with Brindle after their analysis, a more detailed thing, but at least get the letter out there now.
Well, so I think that, did everybody see the watermark on the letter that said draft in big letters that went diagonally across it? Like, I think everybody needs to realize that this was an idea that I had that I put together.
I saw it.
It's great.
Thank you, Marty. And that I deeply want support. Like, I deeply want you guys to give me this information, to give me these criticisms, and help me. I mean, so Nathan, Nate, if you were upset because I didn't more explicitly put in the letter exactly how this is going to impact the Black and Latinx community, and the focus on different types of building retrofits versus new development, I wasn't saying necessarily that retrofits like wholesale in terms of the structure. I'm saying, like, if this is breaking new ground, like, are we destroying native landscape in order to make a new development versus something else? That's the kind of implication that needs to be teased out with these draft letters. So what, I guess, to DJ's point, like, we could make a letter specifically about incentives and send it out immediately in advance of the Brindle planning process. And then, Andy, I don't know if I've ever asked for this or if we've ever received it. I haven't been to every single meeting, but do we have any examples of the kinds of planning and the plans that Brindle has made in this category before?
we've got examples of their plans that they've developed for other cities. Matter of fact, Laura has put together a catalog of dozens of plans, not just from Brendel, but from other organizations. Because we're trying to, we're kind of screening those to kind of see what we sort of like in terms of format and graphics and dynamics of them. But I haven't got into the weeds on how they specifically dealt with development projects and things of that nature.
Okay.
And Ben, just you know, I'm always here to pressure test. That's you know, and I will never hold back on feedback. I think the letter is great, and I think Jensen made an excellent point actually, which is I think really what your letter is saying is like, you know, how you put it in words is like, let's get off our bums and do something. And I think this could be a really useful way for us to sort of advocate for the climate action plan as a whole. And I know you mentioned in the letter, you know, it's a little bit general. And I think that, you know, well, that's kind of the way it'd be. Otherwise, it'd be 500 pages long. But if there's a way we can draw attention to that, because things like ways to better use incentives to get sustainable or regenerative and revitalizing development or retrofits in our city is all sort of included in that plan. If there's a way that we could use it to sort of put a big neon sign on that and you know, maybe call out some really specific pieces of the plan that we all like, that would be of high interest, I think, to us. But I also don't want to sort of water down or get away from the purpose of the letter that you drafted too. So being cognizant of that.
Yeah. And if I can respond to Jensen's point, when we made our presentation to the council, we did make mention of the regional plan, so they are aware of it. And we intentionally did not have Mark or the regional plan presented to council in advance of what we were trying to get adopted on our side or approved. We didn't want to have, you know, anybody might come back and say, well, why are we doing a Kansas City specific plan if we have a regional plan? So, you know, in our presentation, we try to, you know, make the regional plan about, you know, those strategies that the region can look at as a baseline, but the Kansas City specific plan is starting out at the neighborhood level and building upward from there. So, you know, we're going to build off of their work. We're going to use the vulnerability and risk assessment that they've done and look at their strategies as a framework. But we are starting at the community level. And I've spoken with Tom Jacobs about their regional plan a few times and Mike Kelly. And I think they're in agreement that was the proper approach. But at some point during a business session, we'll bring the regional plan to their consideration.
Hey,
right, well,
Jake Wagner had placed in chat that Ben, that Councilwoman Robinson has really been working on this. It might be worth reaching out to her for comment. I don't know how if this group can do that. Specific, I would think you can.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it would hurt to reach out to Councilwoman Robinson and to definitely do it sooner rather than later, because I definitely think that you would want to be involved earlier on in these conversations.
Sure. So, I mean, I think that part of the letter was more on the communication component, and then the other part was just how do we kind of put our backs against the wall to make sure that what the Brendel group comes out with happens. Anybody?
I like that. Yes, you have to make it happen, and you have to put your back against the wall. I like that. But what does that mean yet? Not today, and we're not going to know that until a little bit further down the line on it. I mean, my back's against the wall already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no problem with going both avenues at the same time. You're doing your letter from the commission to the mayor, and the council, and we at the staff level are working with the community to vet the strategy for developments through that process. I mean, there's no reason why both can't be simultaneously going on.
Okay, so I guess it's really two letters. It sounds like we're gonna let the Brindle group do what they're going to do and see what their more strategic and deep dive planning looks like. And then in the meantime, we could do a letter in collaboration with Council Member Robinson about incentives. And then Molly, would you want to work with me on a letter about communication?
Sure.
Cool.
Yep. Maybe I missed something again, but it seems to me that if we send a letter in some way to the Brendel group to nudge them to make sure it include some specific areas that cover this.
I don't even know that you'd have to send a letter to Brindle specifically. If you wanted to send a bulleted list to Andy right now, that's one of the things we're working on with this consultant is just as our office hears ideas from various groups, just in those bullet points, we're like, hey, we need to make sure we cover this and we need to make sure that, this is focused through the entire plan. They're really good about that. So just send it to us and we'll forward it on to Brindle. And
right, because even not just from the public, but even from the city manager, he sends me a note, says, hey, I want this, or I want you to look at this. Like, sure, we'll look at that. So we just add it to the list and we'll vet it through the process.
Yeah, perfect.
Will we have time to talk about regenerative agriculture, soils?
I think we do, and we also need to get a report from Andy. As far as I know, there are no updates from anybody for any of the meetings, correct?
And, yeah, the air quality forum didn't meet.
Didn't meet, no. Andy, why don't you give your report and then we'll turn it over to Marty.
Okay. Well, and Marty, I kept the OAQ report really short because I figured this would happen again. So I'll be brief. Just a couple of highlights here. One second. Okay. Of course, budget season, we're right in the middle of that. So I always like to give a little bit of context what's going on with the city internally so you know what our environment's like, and just kind of give you the opportunity to jump in on these things when necessary or when you're able to. So in terms of the budget, the city manager submitted this to the mayor on February 11th, and the budget adoption is actually on March 25th. So we're coming up on the big day. Hopefully you all had a chance to participate in the public budget hearings, and/or there were various departmental budget presentations. So if there were specific departments you might have had an interest in, you could focus in on those. And those are probably still available on the city's city clerk's page. If you go to the videos on demand, you can usually find those. But anyways, the proposed budget, what includes is a chief equity officer, which is I think a really good, timely position to add to the city staff. There's a tenant advocate position in the budget and a transportation director. So other things in there, there's more snow plowing, there's a doubling of the street resurfacing budget. Of course, many of you know about the LED conversion project as one of the big cost savings measures that we're looking at. There are no proposed cuts to staffing or furloughs of city staff. However, there is an early retirement incentive proposal or that's out there. It could possibly affect up to 600 city staff. So we'll see how that plays out. Typically, cities see about 20% of those will take those incentives. So could be damaging for some folks. I've talked to some folks, particularly in terms of city planning and development, when we're talking about the energy code conversations that'll be coming up before too long. That's a department that's got a lot of more seasoned staff that would be certainly eligible for that retirement package. and they're already short-staffed as it is. And that sort of issue is kind of prevalent in other parts of the city as well. So anyways, just want you to be aware that that's going on. And in terms of OEQ, our budget appears to be still intact, which it would mirror where we are today. So, we're hoping that we'll make it to the 25th and no particular cuts to our funding. So keep you posted on that. Next month, we'll know for sure.
Andy,
yes.
Nathan asked in chat, let me guess, those positions will not be refilled?
So in the retirement, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Nathan. Basically, the way the program's set up, if any of those folks that retire, those positions have to be held vacant for 6 months, a minimum of 6 months, to capture the cost savings from that. After that, if we can show there's a need for that position to be filled, then you have to submit your request to what we call the Position Review Committee, which usually includes the city manager. If you can make the argument to have that position backfilled with either one, or conceivably it could be more than one if they're part-time positions. If you have a way to split it up or find other efficiencies in your staffing, then that's a possibility. But it's essentially a shift of those more seasoned folks that have maybe higher salaries to shift to lower salaries, more entry level type staff positions. So the city's done this periodically every 10 to 15 years. It seems like this is the norm. This will be the second one I've been through. Kind of scary when you hear it's 600 of us that are eligible. It just so happens I'm eligible as well. So not that I'm going anywhere, but yeah, I've heard through the grapevine various pockets of staff that will probably be taking the retirement, and it could hurt some departments in some areas. So we'll see. Any other questions about the budget before I move on? All right. Kansas City is partnering with UMKC in terms of the Heat Watch campaign, and I know there's several other partners on there, Bridging the Gap and NOAA and a few others. So that it's a community heat mapping study that we'll be doing this summer. Feng Pen Sun is the lead on that project. So we're pretty excited about helping them with doing a study of it's going to be focused in Jackson County, and it's essentially collecting data to more or less identify those extreme temperature regions, and particularly those communities that are particularly vulnerable to heat island effect. So hopefully we'll get the results back in that, where we can maybe tie that into our climate action planning process. So that project got kickstarted this week, so we're pretty excited about being involved in that particular project. Molly, do you have anything you want to add to that, or no? Okay. And then the last thing I'll just mention is the climate action update. So we did kickstart our climate action planning with Brendel and Sofix Solutions, which is the equity consultant that is the sub for that project. And it was more or less a preliminary meeting, just kind of talk about the scope. Basically, our initial push will be developing an engagement plan. And then, of course, we have a risk and vulnerability assessment we want to do, and a greenhouse gas inventory. Our last inventory was in 2017, so we're going to go ahead and do one for 2019. And then resetting our baseline to 2005 to kind of match up with the 05 resolution and the Paris agreement. So many of you know that our existing baseline has usually been 2000, so there's going to be a shift in that. But other than that, there's a long laundry list of to-dos for us. Again, staff is going to be supporting Brendel to keep moving forward. Brendel is already starting to look at interns that we can draw from to help us with the planning process, which was one of these things that we liked in their proposal is trying to build some what's the word, Laura, I'm looking for? um, I'm sorry, the word slipped out of my mind, but some capacity. Yes, capacity, that's it. So a lot going on there, but one of the things that we would ask, and I think Laura might already asked about this already, is that if there's particular groups or individuals that you think should be engaged in this process, just send us their email, send us the group name. Laura is keeping a running list of who those folks are. So as we start the engagement process of this project, we're reaching out to the right people, getting them to the table, you know, so we can kind of gather that input. So that is all I really wanted to hit. There's lots of other things going on, but I think just to save Marty 10 minutes, I'm going to stop there, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Take it away, Marty.
Okay. I don't know how, you know, the learning curve was pretty steep. I mean, I talked about this last month, and then I was going to get something out right away, and I ran into more information. So I've been climbing learning curves and living another life too. So if I can just put it together very briefly, the Johnson-Su bioreactor is a process of making compost it's a non-turned compost, a static pile, and it's aerobic. You put tubes down into the pile of leaves, and as you're forming this pile, and then you take the tubes out, and it leaves chimneys down into the pile, and you put a pallet underneath, and it's got holes in it, so the air circulating up through that thing the entire time. So no leaf is any further than a foot away from the air channel, which is supposedly the amount of space that air can penetrate. So it makes a different kind of compost. Instead of turning the compost and have it heat up real hot and it kill all the bacteria and fungus in there except for the thermophilics, this is a much slower process, and it takes a full year, and diversity develops, an incredible diversity of microbes. And so essentially what you're doing by making a Johnson-Su thing is you're making something equivalent to a buffalo's gut, in that it creates an incredible number of microbes. So the buffalo and the plants and the sun made tremendously deep soils on the prairie, which are mostly have been eroded away. And in addition to that, let's get to the prairie. The prairie is basically these injectors, these bio injectors. The buffalo walked around eating grass and having incredible microbe populations in their gut, and they drop them on the prairie at various times, and the dung beetles come and bury that stuff, and so you've inoculated the prairie. And the thing is that this is more toward the fungal side. So the fungal have these hyphae that reach out, and when those hyphae die, they don't just evaporate into the air, they're still down in the soil, and that's where your humus comes from. So, and humus is more a complex molecule that doesn't break down very easily. And also you have, it's a spongy kind of a soil that is made. Now that spongy soil holds a lot of water, in addition to being rich. And so it gets deeper and deeper. So you can make more carbon than is respired. And but right now, if you flew over the prairie, what you would see is a lot of bare ground because the plants haven't come up yet and they didn't leave them from last year. And so all that bare ground is drying up the soil. And there is a kind of a water cycle that takes place between the moisture in the ground, and it evaporates up into the sky, and then it comes back down as rain. It's very easy to see in the rainforest, but it happens all over the earth. So we've unbalanced the earth. This Walter Yenny from Australia is an excellent scientist. I sent a video around about him, and he says, well, carbon is only does a small percentage of the greenhouse effect. And he said the reason that is because water is so complex, nobody touched it. So we're fretting about the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which we should, but it's the carbon in the soil that is making the soil spongy and is affecting the water cycle. Now there's a learning curve here, and I apologize for it, but I didn't make it. So anyway, what I'm wondering is, and I want to do some stuff here. I want to turn our yards into prairies, and I'm not going to bring cows in to drop their feces on our lawns. What we'll do is use this Johnson Sioux compost and then inoculate lawns. And I want to use the block near my garden and the churches that surround it to kind of get this thing running. I want to put biochar on the ground and then spray it with Johnson Sioux, and perhaps encourage the homeowner or the home renter to plant other species with deeper roots that will create more of this spongy carboniferous material in the soil. So I guess what I want from you is attack this learning curve and join me in knowing whether this is worthwhile or not. I think it's really got a lot going for it. So I don't know. Is anybody? Yeah, chicken stew.
I hope he's making some for all of us.
Yeah, well, I have enough. I have enough with what I did to inoculate a full acre of ground. Wait a minute, it's 10. I can use 2 pounds of this stuff per acre, so I can actually do a good portion of Kansas City with the 4 foot by 4 foot bioreactor that I have. And I'd be happy to show it off. I'm starting my second one. I already did one for a year ago, and I've got the material left over, and worms are crawling through it as we speak. So anyway.
Marty, I've watched all those videos, and they're amazing. It's wonderful. The Johnson video is just fantastic. And I plan on attending the Soil Summit that's coming.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm also looking for a student in our genetics department to see if we can't maybe somehow partner on a something.
There's so many things to know, like companion planting that we used to think about. Now with the microbial stuff, each species of plant has a different population of microbes. And when you plant them in concert with one another, they don't steal from one another as in competition. They actually, you can grow many species at the same time and they all succeed, which is something humans could learn.
So Marty, one of the things that kind of strikes me, and this is just having lived in Tucson, Arizona, they had a huge native landscaping movement decades ago, and so you have a huge. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore to have bluegrass or grass seed everywhere in the desert than it does here. So have you thought of like researching the way that other parts of the country have tackled that native landscaping thing? And I mean, Bob obviously is on top of this stuff too.
Well,
sure.
Johnson, the PhD microbiologist, was in Santa Cruz, New Mexico, is where he did his work in desert, and he showed the desert as it was, and then showed the desert after they worked with the Johnson Sioux, and he had waist high grass.
Yeah.
And he, you know, it's like the water, the drought doesn't cause the desert. Wait a minute, I can't remember. There's a quote. Does anybody remember that one?
No,
Alan Savory.
Marty, you're on the right track. It's the drought doesn't cause the desert causes the drought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like if we had the microbes in place, the spongy soil would hold that water, and the whole water cycle for the entire planet would be different, which is what our problem is right now.
Although Savory is not, there's been a lot of pushback on some of his work.
Yeah, I've heard there's some, but I haven't looked into it. But they're still using his quote, yeah. Which makes sense with this information. So I don't know how many people will boot up to get to the point where we can actually talk and figure out where we're going with it. I think we're in the educating ourselves mode right now. At least I still am, and I'm getting it better. And every time I go through it, I do it better. I did it better this week than I did this month than I did last month. And next month I'm going to be peerless.
Well, so I think that one of the selling points. Oh, sorry, Molly.
No, I just put
the park department.
Molly.
Yeah, can you supply the parks department?
I could certainly. I think we ought to get them involved and figuring this out. Get their learning curve moving. See, it's the learning curve we need. You know, all the time I've ever been on this management thing, the most important thing we've had is education. If we could just get education, people would get excited. You know, I am genuinely excited about this for my grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know, I really am. Mm-hmm. It's not just a conspiracy.
Well, I think that part of it, and one of the great things that I got from the stuff that you send is just how much this creates the natural environment for success with plants, as opposed to chemical fertilizers, in which people have been brainwashed to believe that they have to spend all of this money every single year on this stuff. Whereas if you just create the natural, benevolent kind of circumstances for this to work, then it's actually less work in the long run than more work.
Well, and it's less costly for farmers. And Walter Yenny was talking about after World War II, they started putting more and more on the soil, and it's the moron,
right?
Because they had chemicals and poisons ready from World War II, and they didn't want to go out of business.
Right.
Anyway, I'm done. I had my say. If anybody wants to help me with this, or let's take different aspects of it or something, I'm gung ho. Let me know.
Well,
Thank you,
I mean,
Marty.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what the right venue would be to get the information spread to the general pop.
Well, I'm going to use Nextdoor. I'm going to try to get somebody to, if I can get a little money together, I can hire somebody that can actually work harder than I can, and start inoculating lawns. I've got a guy that owns 7 houses on my block over the garden, and he's willing to do it. He's willing to join with me at, I'm not going to charge him anything. I don't care. You know, money is no object.
Marty,
Yes.
first you're gonna have to distill that PowerPoint of Johnson's because it's awful. It just in how so much information, it's not digestible. I mean, it's.
I know. Well, I need a committee to help me do that. I mean, you sent that thing back to me, and that sent me off into another whole track, and that's why I didn't do anything more with it.
But people should also watch Kiss the Ground, and we're trying to host a virtual screening of it in April. It is so positive. It's such a wonderfully positive, and it's all about the soil. It's not so much about the bioreactor microbes, but it is all about soil, and it's really, really positive. So it's a great film.
Well, see, the bioreactor backs it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same stuff they're talking about.
I think you need to apply for one of these grants and start building them in various places around town.
I was going to say, apply for that biochar thing. We'll back you on it.
Okay, well, but I'm on you can't, because that'd be a conflict of interest.
Then
I'm on the committee. I'm on the
committee.
I'll resign. I'll
How would be a conflict of interest if the city's doing something with a mayoral appointed person? I don't know. Maybe.
I think as long as I expose myself.
Well, that's a good thing that it's dark there then.
Please don't expose yourself, Marty.
No, you can't go there. It's 6:06. People are...
I know. Everybody's already having dinner. I'm starving.
The dark. Okay, goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you listening.
Thank you for the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Carol.
I guess we'll see you next month.
Absolutely.
Great.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Oh boy.
Measure makes it easier for workers to organize, and it penalizes employers to interfere. The public ends are expected to be in this Senate. And on Wall Street, stocks mostly advanced on news that inflation remains in check. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 464 points, to close at 32,297. That's a new record. NASDAQ marked time, losing 5 points, and the S&P 500 added 23. Still to come on the news hour, the U.S. House passes President Biden's historic coronavirus stimulus bill. One European country implements a system for vaccinated people to travel more freely. Jury selection is underway in the trial of the police killing of George Floyd, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism on the State News.
A key part of the COVID relief bill creates the most changes to the Affordable Care Act since it was passed more than 10 years ago, among other changes. Important provisions include providing larger subsidies to buy insurance, reducing deductibles, covering the entire cost of COBRA, the insurance extent for those who recently lost a job, and giving states more money to Medicaid. The Congressional Budget Office These changes could cost $1 billion over the next 2 years. Julie Kaiser, Health News, watches all this closely, joins me now. Julie, thank you so much for joining us. So let's first talk about CA, the parts that affect CA, that money reach people. Tell us how it works.
Well, it basically boosts subsidies by about $35 billion. Now, this is just 2 years. Will particularly help people top at the very bottom of it, including thresholds for the law. People at the top right now, if you earn more, I'm talking about $50,000 per an individual, you basically get no help. There's this cliff where you have to pay everything yourself. You pay 8 your income. That could dramatically reduce premiums for people cut off threshold by as much as half. Then people at the bottom would also get subsidies so that people half-time poverty, about $19,000 individual, with access to a zero premium silver plan, that middle level plan. So they're pretty significant increase.
It sounds very significant. And Julie, I want to ask you about Medicaid. There's enticement in here, as we mentioned, for states that have so far chosen not to expand Medicaid. How would that work?
There's a dozen states that have not expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, including some really big ones like Texas, Florida. Basically, what they would do is encourage these states by giving them a larger share of federal funding for their current Medicaid populations, not the expansion population. Again, it would be temporary. It would be 2 years in the hopes that maybe that sort of financial relief would encourage some of these states to go ahead and expand Medicaid eligibility upwards a little bit.
And then, Julie, I'm off as we mentioned that yet another provision here to people who've been laid off from jobs to continue to receive this employer paid health insurance, the so-called COBRA provision.
That's right. COBRA dates back to 1986, and it allows people to continue their employer coverage when they lose their job, but they have higher premium themselves, which can be many, many hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars a month. So this is a very short-term provision that said if you've been laid off or if you've had your hours cut so that you can't, you don't qualify for coverage anymore, the federal government will pay 100% COBRA premium only for as much as 6 months.
And you were telling us, Julie, efforts are being made to make some of these changes, instead of being just 2 years, to be permanent?
Well, certainly they'll expire in 2 years, and clearly there will be a political fight. I imagine Democrats will want to continue them, and I imagine Republicans won't. And they're going to argue, they're going to basically decide who's going to take the political hit.
And you thing I want to ask, Republicans, some of their criticism today, among many others, at this COVID relief bill, and what they say is a provision that would require $36 billion worth of cuts to Medicare. How do we understand that?
Well, this was actually a provision that was last put in by Democrats in 2010 to keep the deficit from exploding. And it says if you don't pay for new spending, then we will cut Medicare. And so that is in fact true. Now Congress can and has in the past waived this. So again, another political fight about whether they will let Medicare cuts take place or whether they will actually vote to waive those cuts.
But we'll see, is what you're saying on that last one.
Yeah.
All right, Julie Rovner covering all these healthcare changes in this new piece of legislation. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Meantime, starting today, Texans can work and gather without a statewide mandate for masks or distancing after Governor Abbott this month that declared the state, quote, 100%. Jardin talks to a local leader there about what comes next.
We get a sense of where things stand with Judge Lina Hidalgo, a Democrat. She is the head of the governing body of Harris County, Texas, which includes Houston and is the third largest county in this country. Judge Hidalgo, let's start first of all with setting the scene for us. Take us there. Are people wearing masks for the most part or no? And do you think it's safe to, in fact, lift the mask?
Starting today in Texas,
every kind of entity, big or small, gathering big or small, can take place at 100% capacity, and all mask mandates have been lifted. In fact, counties and cities have been prohibited from implementing their own mask mandate. It remains to be seen what folks do, but if history is any indication, we will see folks wearing masks less and less as the days go by. Initially, we had a mask mandate here in Harris County about a year ago at this point. Folks were wearing their masks, then the governor superseded that mandate, eliminated it. Folks stopped wearing the mask until governor reinstated the mask mandate, which he's now again removing. Now, was it a good idea? I'm afraid not. I'm afraid it was premature. We have such good news in terms of the stimulus package we were just hearing about, in terms of the vaccines that are steadily coming. And so we know we're going to get to the point that we need to get to, but we're not there yet. In Harris County, for example, less than 1 in 10 people over the age of 16 have been vaccinated. So we've got a ways to go, and there's no reason why to open ourselves up to unnecessary deaths, hospitalizations, just for the sake of wanting to claim a premature victory.
Are you talking about that concern over safety? But you know, some business owners in Harris County, I've seen their words. They say that they're thrilled that they can reopen fully, and they say they can decide for themselves, impose within their place, enforce a mask kind of mandate on, for example. Why shouldn't business owners? What do you say to those struggles who we want to reopen?
First, I understand the challenges that everybody has been facing over the past year, economic challenges that folks are facing. The matter is, we are not going to, until we get past this virus. And we've known that every time there's been a reopening in the state, within a month or so, the hospitalizations and the deaths have shot up. We don't need to lose more people knowing that the end is. Why should government intervene in this kind of situation? Because it's a disaster. The lack of government engagement, regulation, in terms of preserving our ability to produce energy is what led to the crisis just a few weeks back here in terms of the winter weather. And now again with COVID, during a disaster is specifically the time when individuals alone, private businesses alone, can't possibly take care of the entire community. That is when government needs to step in.
I know that you spent time with President Biden in the past few weeks when he visited, and a bill now moving to his desk is the American Rescue Plan. Inside that bill is $900 million just for Harris County alone, more for the city of Houston as well. That's almost a third of your annual budget. Why is that necessary right now, and how do you plan?
We're very grateful to our congressional partners, the administration of this bill. Of course, the aid for localities was where vaccine, the clinics. In fact, we've used local dollars, local coffers in supporting small business folks who have lost their employment. We were getting to a point where we were about whether we'd be able to balance the reduced revenues that we were expecting. So it's big help. And look, we're going to continue as we did with the past set of federal dollars to these ailing businesses, these folks who frankly have been on the front lines. I mean, you talk about the business leaders who are saying, you know, we've got a lot of people who are actually still maintaining the mask order and the capacity limitations to protect the community.
Very briefly, though, in this last 30 seconds, you know, you were able to make your budget. You did have a balanced budget in the last year. In fact, just a little bit more revenue that you have to spend this year. But why should the federal government, Republicans are asking, be sending money to counties like yours, which don't have a budget problem?
It depends, right? So the cities, they rely on the sales tax. So they're feeling the hit right now. For us as Harris County, we rely on property taxes. We're getting a bigger impact in the next year. And we are seeing additional needs, not just from COVID, but also from the winter storm. So as we make our budgetary project, we do need to be able to make up the gap. And we have been doing, you know, broadband programs. We've been doing small business, domestic violence, childcare, all kinds of programs directly to the community, and this will let us continue to do more. The fact is, the sooner we get through this, get those vaccinations, the faster we're going to recover, the faster the economy is going to be back on track. Judge Lena Hidalgo of Harris, thank you for joining us.
Europe's tourist industry has taken a beating pandemic, and as one way to boost travel, Denmark is introducing vaccine passports. Documents provide proof of a COVID-related health, eliminating the need to quarantine upon arrival in a new country. Opponents fear that this could create billions of second-class citizens. Special correspondent Malcolm Brabham reports.
London's Gatwick Airport has been little more than a giant jet parking lot since COVID struck. It symbolises how we've all been imprisoned by the coronavirus. Governments across the world hope vaccinations will liberate their citizens and economies. The British government is backing research by a company led by Andrew Budd. It specialises in facial recognition technology.
The World Health Organization is currently working on international standards for digital vaccine certificates, which will make this much more feasible.
Budd says his system is ready to roll.
The technology of this is the easy bit of it. We've built this technology so that it can be trialed, so that it can be put into different use cases, and the political and social and ethical aspects of this can be explored. Those are the real challenges of vaccine certificates.
Vaccination passports gave rise to some really significant human liberties concerns.